Hey everybody, uglyShader here with another YouTube video tutorial, and today, as hopefully you were able to figure out from the title, we're building some logic gates. Now, logic gates are, well, basically they're the principle that anything digital technology-wise you use is based off of. From the calculator you used at school, to the phone in your pocket, the computer on your desk, the laptop you carry with you, doesn't really matter. If it's a piece of digital technology, it's built on the principles that logic gates work off of. And basically, they're just a bunch of on-off switches, some fancy on-off switches. And, some of the switches work in different ways, and by combining the different switches together, you can end up with a variety of different results from your on-off switch option. Now, if you've been through too many other of my tutorials, you'll probably notice that a lot of what I do works off the principle of 0 to 1 as far as the math and stuff like that that's used in materials. Just 0 to 1 seems to be a really common scale that you find in the material nodes as well as other places in Blender. And that kind of lends itself really well to logic gates because logic gates being, I guess, binary counters, you could consider them. Anyway, they work off the principle of on and off, or 0 to 1. 0 would be off, 1 would be on. Now, there's a couple different ways that you could build them, and we'll get into the different ways that they can be built. I use oftentimes, or the way I'm going to be showing you, I use a variety of less than and greater than nodes that then feed into like multiply and add nodes. And I like using the greater than and less than nodes because they're almost already a logic gate in themselves. They're kind of an if-then statement as it stands. Basically, the node looks at the two different input values, whether there's things connected to them or not. It looks at the two different values that it can see, and it evaluates based on, the mathematical term it's using, which is greater than. So it looks at the top number and says, is the top number greater than the bottom number? And same with the less than node, only obviously is the top number less than the bottom number. And then when it makes that determination, instead of sending out a variable, a float, a number somewhere between 0 to 1, it simply either sends out a 0 or a 1. If the top number is not greater than the bottom number, the output is 0. If the top number is greater than the bottom number, the output is 1. So they kind of already function almost like a logic gate, so they're really easy to build the gates out of. So the gates we'll be building will be using a lot of nodes in the way of greater than or less than. Now, we'll get into the function of each different node, but real quick, let's take a peek at what's actually hiding inside these node groups that we're going to build today. And don't worry, it looks a lot worse than it really is. So if I zoom out and zoom up, this right here is what's inside this line of node groups. Now, mind you, we're not actually going to take the time to build these ridiculously large ones. And that's for a very important reason. We have a NOT gate, an OR gate, an AND gate, a NOR gate, a NAND gate, an XOR gate, a half adder, and a full adder. And all of this stuff that's built here is built literally just by combining these three sets together in different ways. So we're just going to build these three sets, and then from those three sets, we'll build these three sets, and we'll build them out of groups. We'll turn these into node groups, and then just use node groups to build these three sets. And then those three, well, this set at least out of those three will be used to produce these. And again, we'll just make them into groups so it'll all be super easy. That looks way worse than it actually is. All we're really going to do is that there. So real simple stuff technically. But before we get into that, let's just take a peek at the different functions of the groups, or the logic gates. First on the list, first almost always on the list, is a NOT gate. And all a NOT gate is it's an inverter. If your input is off, the output is on. If your input is on, the output is off. And it's as simple as that. So right now our input is 0, and I have this set up so that anything above 0 is counted as on. So there's 0.1, that's on. It could be 0.001, doesn't matter, that's still on. If it's above 0, it is on. So currently at 0, it would be off. But because this function, the function of this logic gate is to invert whatever signal it's looking at, if I plug this into this mix shader right here, our cube turns green. Same thing that would happen if we turned this up to 1. So even though technically this is off as far as its input's concerned, its output is showing as on because it inverts the signal. If I were to turn this on, it then shuts off its output or switches it back to 0 because it is inverting the signal. It is getting a signal that says, hey, we're on, so its response is to send an output that is off. And that is a NOT gate. The OR gate is just what its name says. A lot of them are pretty much just what their name says. The OR gate is either or. We could turn this one on and it sends an output, or we can turn this one on and we get an output of 1. It doesn't matter which one we turn on or if we have both on at the same time. It's irrelevant. So long as one of them has a positive input, then it will send a positive output. Next is our AND gate, and just like the name indicates, we can turn one on and nothing will happen. Turn the other on, nothing will happen. But if we turn both of them on, if this switch is on and this switch is on, then the output will be on. From there, it's actually fairly simple for the next two. We have a NOR gate and an AND gate. And basically, it's just the OR gate or the AND gate, but inverted. So right now, it's on because both of these are off. And it's an OR gate, so it wouldn't matter which one of them had the right input, basically. The output would be positive, I guess you could say. Well, in this case, it's the exact opposite. So if this one's off, it's on. But if we turn either of these on, it will switch the output to off. So it's just an OR gate that's been inverted. And same thing with the next one. It's just an AND gate that's inverted. We can turn this one, we don't get the change. We can turn this one, we don't get the change. But if we turn both of them, we get the change. It's just an AND gate. However, if it's, receiving lows, it's going to send out highs. If it's receiving highs, it's going to send out lows. It's just an inverted version of the AND gate. That's where they stop repeating themselves, though. Here we have an XOR gate. And an XOR gate, the best way I can reference an XOR gate is a three-way light switch in a house. You ever been in one of those homes where you can walk into like the kitchen or the dining room and you can flip a switch up as you're walking in and it'll turn on the light, and then you could walk out through a different door and there's a switch that you can also flip up and it'll turn the light back off even though you flip the switch up. That's kind of what an XOR gate is like. It's like a three-way light switch in a house. I can turn this one on and our cube will change color. I can turn this one on and our cube will change color. It doesn't matter which one I turn on, our cube will change color. However, if our cube is already on and I turn the one that's off on, our cube goes back to its original state. So it doesn't matter which input you change, it is going to give you a change in output regardless of what your current output is or which input you change. So technically the truth table for this would be that if A and B are 0, your output is 0. If A or B are 1, but not both of them, so just if either or is 1, your output is 1, and if both of them are 1, your output goes back to 0. So yeah, it doesn't matter what order you do it in, it's 100% irrelevant. It will always change its state when one of its inputs changes state. And that's the XOR gate. Now we have an adder, a half-bit adder, and again, these are all counting in binary. That's just how they count. It's a two's complement counting system. Like we count in multiples of 10. You know, we have our ones, our tens, hundreds, thousands, 10,000s, 100,000s, millions, just so on and so forth. We count by multiples of 10. Binary works by counting in multiples of 2. And you know, they kind of have categories the same as we do, but they have their ones category, the twos, the fours, the eights, the 16s, the 32s, so on and so forth. So these are counting a little different than how we traditionally count, and we'll see that in action in the full bit adder. But for the half bit adder, basically it does what it says, it's adding. So if we plug this one in here, and we plug this one in here, and let's go ahead and set this to a different color. So now, if we turn one of these on, and again, it doesn't matter which one we turn on, what it's going to do is it's going to send an output across, right now it's listed as sum and carry. We could just consider this 1 and 2, if you would like. So this is our first binary line, our ones line, and this is our second binary line, our twos line. If we had another one, it would be our fours line, and then our eights line, and then our 16s line, so on and so forth, just multiplying by 2 every time. So, as it stands, if we turn on either of these, it's going to light up the ones line. And it doesn't matter which one we turn on. Either way, it's going to send something out on the sum line, our one line. And then if we happen to turn both of them on, it's actually going to shut off the one line. Like if I were to disconnect this, you could see we're back to black. So now it's sending a 0 out on our one line, and our two line is sending 1 out. So it's actually counted and added that together for us. We are currently giving it 1 input, and it doesn't matter which one we're giving it, we're only giving it 1 input. And now we're giving it 2 inputs. So it's no longer counting on 1, it's counting on 2. Now our full adder works on the same principle, only it's got one more stage to it. So let's throw one more of these shaders in here and go to red with this one. So now we can plug our sum into here and our carry out into here, and it's going to work the same as the half adder. When one of them is on, and it doesn't matter which one, it's going to activate this line, the ones line, or number 1. If 2 of them are on, and it doesn't matter which 2, it's going to activate the carry out line, our 2 line. And then because we only have 3 inputs, we wouldn't need a 4s line because 1 plus 2 is 3, right? So like we can't count higher than 3, and we have a 1s line and a 2s line, and that's exactly how binary is going to count it for us. If we have one of them on, it's going to send a 1 out here and a 0 out here. Our 1's line has a number, our 2's line does not. So our number would just be 1. If we have 2 of them on, it's going to send a 0 out on our 1's line, and it's going to send a 1 out on our 2's line. So our 0's line is off, our 2's line is on, so number 2. And then if we turn all 3 of them on, well, because it's counting in binary, instead of a third spot for number 3, it's actually going to send, if I cut this off, a positive value out on this one and a positive value out on this one, because 1 plus 2 equals 3. So that's a real easy way we could look at how it's counting. Each of these outputs in an adder represents a bit in our binary, you know, a slot for our numbers, our 1 slot, our 2 slot, and then again next would be our 4's slot. So if we had adders put together to the extent that we had 6 switches or 6 on-off options instead of just 3 or whatnot, we would actually be able to use the 4's output because we can't go above 3 with these two. So a 6 would be a 1 on the 4's line and a 1 on the 2's line with a 0 on the 1's line, because 4 plus 2 would be our 6. Anyway, we're kind of getting off on a tangent here. In order to utilize our full bit adder, though, because it's lighting up both of these at the same time, we need to be able to recognize that. And that's actually going to require an AND gate, which we just so happen to have one up there. So we can plug this into the third one, and basically this will always be a 0. Oh, sorry. Those are activated. This will always be a 0 unless inputs 1 and inputs 2, or line 1 and line 2, are active. So now we have nothing active. You can see we're getting our black color, and then it doesn't matter which one of these we turn on, it'll go green for us. And again, doesn't matter which one, all 3 of them, it's just going to count it as 1. Now if we turn 2 of them on, we go red, and again, doesn't matter which 2 we turn on, so long as it's 2 of them. And then with all 3 of them on, it'll send outputs off both these. So our AND gate will say, hey, we got a positive input here and a positive input here, so make our output positive. And when we turn all 3 of them on, we go blue. So that's the general function of the gates we're going to build today. And again, like I said, not very hard. That looks a lot more extreme than it needs to be, honestly. These are really, really simple to build. And I'm not actually going to close this window or whatnot, because I'm going to come back here for some more examples with this guy here, because I have a little quadrants node group set up here, so we can look a little better at how it counts and stuff. Anyhow, so let's open up a new Blender. Gonna have a third one going now. Jeez, it's getting a little excessive. Alright, so let's give ourselves a cube so that we can make sure our gates are working right. You know, just something to test them on. Drag our node editor over, and we don't need that up. Actually, I can go ahead and start display. Might as well have some screencast keys up there. Throw in my cursor. No background, so let's switch this to our node editor and switch this over to the world tab, and let's just throw in a super quick just a sky texture, just something to add some color to the environment that's not just flat bland gray. Alright, we can switch that back to materials, and yeah, let's come over here and add a sun lamp, just cuz. And set it to like a strength of 3, and I'll rotate you on the Y to about there, and then on the Z, that, no, it's probably fine where it was. Yeah, that's fine. Alright, so at least now basically we have something we can see and test on to make sure our materials, or our nodes are working. Let's throw a color mix RGB in here and plug that in, and we'll set the top color to black, the bottom color to nice bright white, and throw our slider all the way down. Alright, so the first gate we need to build is the NOT gate, the inverter gate. And like I said, I like to use greater than and less than nodes because of how they function. Well, our NOT gate's actually really, really super simple. We just need a greater than node and a less than node. Our greater than node feeds into here, and we set the value of our less than node to 1, the value of our greater than node to 0. So basically what this is going to do is our greater than node's going to look at our top value and say, hey, is this greater than the bottom value? With our bottom value set to 0, if our value is a 0, it's going to say, hey, no, it's not greater, send a 0 out. And if we happen to switch our value on, turn it to anything but 0, you know, anything greater than 0, it's then going, you know what, I could plug that in so we could actually see that. And why are you white? Let's go, yeah, because you're not actually 0. There we go. Alright, so, yeah, if it's going to look at this top number and say, hey, is it greater than 0? If it is, Or, I mean, if it's not, in this case, it's 0 as well, it sends a 0 out. It's like, no, it is not greater. The answer is false. False is 0. And any increase in this is going to say, hey, yes, it is greater than 0. The output is true. True is 1. Now, depending upon where you want your switch to activate, you can actually change this bottom value. I like mine to activate as soon as it gets any input at all. Because, I mean, it doesn't matter if the fan's on low, medium, or high, it's on, right? As soon as it has power, it's on. So for me, I like them to switch as soon as there's any input at all. However, you could set this to like 0.999, and then it won't switch until you make it all the way up to 1, 0.995. You got almost 1 worth of input and it still won't switch. So you can set them up either way you'd like. You can either set it as a low switch, which is what I use. I use 0 so that it's a low end switch. As soon as it has any power at all, it switches. Or you can set it up at like 0.999 or whatnot so that it's a high end switch. So it won't switch until it has maximum power, basically. So you take your greater than node and then you drop in your less than node. And basically what you're doing is, because right now, no, we are not greater than whatever the bottom number is, so we're sending an output of 0 out. Well, your less than node looks at that and says, hey, is this value less than 1? If it is, go ahead and send out 1. Is this less than this? Well, currently we're sending in 0. Yes, 0 is less than 1. Therefore, the output of this is true. True in the sense that the top number is less than the bottom number. Therefore, this will send a 1 out. So basically all this less than with a value of 1 right here does is anything that's not an on output, it turns into an on output. And if we switch this, well, now our value is greater than 0 here, therefore the greater than node says true and sends a 1 out. And this says, hey, is 1 less than 1? Well, no, it's not, so send a 0 out. And that's kind of what I meant by these already almost work as logic gates as is. They're kind of like little if-then statements, which is handy. So that's our NOT gate. Anytime there's a 0 coming in, it'll turn it into a 1. Anytime there's a 1 coming in, it'll turn it into a 0. And what we'll do is we'll just shift and click that other one, and then press T to open that up. And we can go into this group tab here and make group. We'll plug this one in here and this one in here, and there is our NOT group. So now let's go ahead and go up, and over here in the view properties or whatever, we can just give it a label of NOT. That's kind of hard to read on my giant screen. I should make it, oh, I didn't mean to click you. Oh, yeah, okay, whatever. I should make you a bit bigger. There we go. Now I can see things. All right, so there's our NOT group. It's our inverter. Next, we need the OR group and the AND group. And we're actually going to build both of them at the same time because they're almost identical. So we'll need our math nodes. And just like last time, we're going to start with some greater thans set to a value of 0 so that anything greater than completely off equals on. And let's make ourselves 4 of those. 2 for the OR gate, 2 for the AND gate. Now, what we need to do is we need 1 more node for each of them. But these aren't going to be our greater thans or less thans. These are actually going to be what makes the gate function. So basically what we've done here is we have our greater thans, and they're just acting as our on-off switches. As soon as there's power, it sends 1 out. If there is no power, it sends 0 out. So these are just our on and off switches. Well, an OR gate says that if this one or this one is sending a 1 through, let's send a 1 through. Well, that's simple enough. All we have to do is plug this one and that one in, and switch it to add. So if this one's got a 1, it'll send a 1 through. If this one's got a 1, it'll send a 1 through. So it doesn't matter which one turns on, this will just add the two options together and send it out. So no matter which one's on, if one of them is on, this will send a value out. Now, we're working on a 0 to 1 scale, and technically if both of these were on, this would be sending a 2 out. Probably not going to have much of a problem with that, because odds are this is going to be plugging into the back of another one of these node groups that filters that sort of thing. But in the instance where this is running directly out to something, and say you're controlling like a color with it or something like that, well, you'd still want to keep it on that 0 to 1 value. And that's what clamp is for. When you turn clamp on one of these nodes, it limits its output to a 0 to 1 value. So instead of 1 plus 1 equals 2, it's going to say, hey, 1 plus 1 equals bigger than 1, therefore send out 1. And there it is right there. That is our OR group. So just like last one, let's go ahead and make a group out of this. Plug in that one, plug in that one, and our output. Now let's go up and name that OR really fast. And there's our OR group. Okay, so now it's time for the AND group. And like I said, these two are almost identical. The only difference between them is instead of adding, we're going to multiply. And that works really well simply because a number times 0 is 0. And let's turn clamp on. No real reason, because even if this is on and this is on, that's 1 times 1. And a number times 1 is the original number, so 1 times 1 is going to be 1. So technically we don't need clamp on this one. It's just a habit I got into. But yeah, this just works off basic math principles, where if you multiply a number by 0, the answer is 0. So if this one's turned on, but this one's not turned on, well, we're going to have 1 times 0, which is going to give us a 0. Same thing other way around. If this one's turned on, but that one's not, we're going to have 0 times 1, which is going to give us the answer of 0. The only way for this to have an output is if both of these are turned on. That way we're not multiplying by a 0. And that's it. We go ahead and grab this one, make a group out of it, plug them in just like we did with the last one, and go up, and we can call this our AND group. And there we go. There's the 3 primary logic gates. Now everything we make from here on is going to be made out of these logic gates. For example, the inverted version of the OR gate and the inverted version of the AND gate, the NOR and NAND gates, well, that's just an OR gate plugged into a NOT gate. There you go. There's your NOR gate and your NAND gate. Done. Now, mind you, the way this is put together, because I connected these, this bottom one on the greater than, I connected it to the group output. I actually did that on purpose. That way, it's easier to adjust whether or not you want it to be a low switching gate or a high switching gate. So in this particular situation, we're not going to plug anything into the bottom of these NOTs, these NOT gates, because this is just our switch to determine whether it switches as soon as there's power to it, or if it has to make it all the way to pretty much maximum power before it switches. That's all those are for us, so yeah, I have them exposed there. So yeah, we can actually just select those two, make group, plug you in here, and I'm actually not going to plug that in. You can just go into the group to make that adjustment if you want. But there we go, our A input, our B input, and our output. So that's our NOR group. And same thing with our inverted AND group. I'm going to stop clicking that and make that go away. There's a hotkey if you got Node Wrangler, it's just Control G. So like G is as in gray, Control G to make a group. So here's the same thing, only this one is our inverted AND group, so NA Oops, I think I hit caps lock. Yeah, N-A-N-D, sorry. Real sensitive keyboard. So that's our NAND group. So there we go. We got 5 built already. Now this next one's a little bit trickier. Let's grab us 2 NOT groups, 2 AND groups, and an OR. So this is going to be our XOR gate. XOR or EXOR, depending upon where you're looking at it. And yeah, it's 2 NOT gates, 2 AND gates, and an OR gate. Okay, and I'm going to make this all a group right now, so it's just a little easier to keep track of our inputs, where they're coming from. All right, so a NOT gate, just like always, we plug in here and plug in here. And remember, these bottom numbers are simply our switching point. You know, technically, I can go ahead and go, oh, no, we can go in there and cut that off, just so that's less confusing. Why didn't you cut off? Oh, because I didn't delete them out of there. No, interface. Yeah, you. Goodbye. Okay. So now, if we go back up, yeah, see, now they're just not there, so it's less confusing. And you'll notice the same thing happened to both of them. That's because just like when you add multiple one material, the same material to a bunch of different objects, that's how it works when you shift D a node group. You can see all 3 of these knots have a number after them that says 6, and that's because they're all sharing the same properties. Now, if I want to be able to change this one without changing the others, I'll need to click this 6 so that technically it's its own node group. See, and then I can reattach that, and this one has 2 of them, but these don't anymore. Anytime you make a copy like that, it makes that change. If we back out of this node group and come up here, the original knot no longer has 2 values. When I made the change to the 1 knot inside here, because all of their properties were linked, it made the change to that NOT gate there as well. Anyhow, and we actually don't want different or the same input going to both those NOT gates. We want A running to one and B running to the other, basically. Alright, so now for our AND gates do have 2 inputs, you know, this one and that one. Well, for the top AND gate, we're going to plug this NOT into the top value of the AND gate. For the bottom AND gate, instead of plugging it into the top, we're actually going to plug it into the bottom, going all symmetrical on this. And then for these other 2 inputs, they're going to be our A and B, but they're going to be switched around from how our inverted A and B are going in. So here, where A is for the top line, I want to put it down on this one. And where B is running the bottom line on this one, I want it to go on that. So they just switch right there. And then both of our ANDs plug into our OR, and that goes to our output. And basically what this is going to do is if this one is turned on, it's going to it's going to run up here and shut this off. So basically when this one is off and this one is on, it'll send an output. When this one, we'll go from here. When this one is off and this one is on, it'll send an output. And when they're both on, it'll shut its output back off. Because like if this turns on, it's going to shut off the output from that NOT gate, making the AND gate not work. Same thing with this. If this one turns on, it's going to shut this AND gate down. So technically it's a little awkward the way they put it together, but it's super simple, the principle behind how it works. And yeah, it's just NOTs, ANDs, and ORs put together. That's it. Like I said, all of these are just going to be the 3 first gates that we build, all put together in different combinations. All right, and this one's our XOR gate. So there we go. That's all your primary gates. Now, we're going to build 2 circuits out of them. We're going to build a half adder circuit and a full adder circuit, but when it comes to gates, this is pretty much it. Almost anything in a digital device, even the most complicated CPU or anything like that. It's still all working off the same basic principles of these 6 gates. Technically, it's just these 4 gates here because the NOR gate and the NAND gate, and there's even, inverted versions of the XOR gate and stuff like that. But those are all just the original gate being inverted. So these 4 right here are the primaries. And I said these 3 are the primaries because this gate here is just built out of the other 3 gates. This XOR gate is just 2 NOTs, 2 ANDs, and an OR. So it's the 3 beginning primary gates that I talked about in, a combination just wired together. And that's all any of them are past these first 3. Anything past these first 3 are just these gates wired together in different configurations. All right, so let's get the half adder and the full adder and then show you that one example I had laid out, as well as another example I put together where it was just a really simple example of, like, I guess, I don't even, dynamic material based on the movement of an object in the environment, I guess you could say. A really complicated term for something simple. Anyhow, so let's go ahead and get our half adder. And our half adder is stupid simple. Our half adder is the XOR gate we've built and the AND gate that we've built. So let's select both of those. I'm going to Control G to make a group out of them. And we're going to plug in our 2 inputs to our XOR gate, our A and our B. And we're going to plug those same inputs in the same configuration into our AND gate, our A and our B. And those become 2 separate outputs. And that is the half adder. Done. So let's come up here and name it HALF A. I should cap that. ADDER. Half adder. Super simple. Like, now that we have our groups made, it might be one of the simplest we've done. However, there's one the next one's a little bit trickier, and that's going to be our full bit adder. And it's just a little bit trickier because it's got 3 inputs, so things get a little hectic when plugging it in. All right, and that's going to be our XOR gate, and we want 2 of them, and then we want 2 of our AND gates, and 1 of our OR gates. So let's just go ahead and I'll box select you, make a group with Control G, and let's start getting these plugged in. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to plug that in there, and again, so that we have our 2 outputs, because our half adder has 2 outputs. And I'm just going to plug this in. Oh, didn't mean to do that. Over here, just plug some random ones in over here. So now we have our 3 inputs. And since this one's a little more complicated, I'm going to go ahead and name our inputs so that they're just easier for y'all to keep track of while we're building this. So we got our A, B, and C inputs. We have 2 XOR gates, 2 AND gates, and an OR gate. And just like in our XOR gate, we're going to set these up here like this so that our OR gate has both of our AND gates plugged into it. Just like that. And then this is actually going to be our 2 outputs. One of them is going to come off this second XOR gate, and the other one's going to come off the OR gate. And those are our 2 outputs. Everything else is just hooking our inputs to these 6 here and these 2 here. And yet all 8 of these inputs that we have are going to either be tied off of the output of this XOR gate or these 3 inputs here. So we'll start and we'll make it simple and we'll just go in order. We're going to go A and then B, and that goes into our first XOR gate. And then here in our second XOR gate, we're going to skip the top input, and C is going to go to that there. All right, and we're skipping this top input because this XOR gate plugs into that top input right there. So that's the 2 XOR gates plugged in. Now we just got to plug in these 2 AND gates. Now we're going to do A, B, skip C, and we're going to do it backwards. So our A is going to come all the way down to the bottom. Then our B is going to be the next one, and then we're going to skip a spot and then plug our C in, just like that. And the spot that we skipped, just like last time, is that one there. Oh, I hope that's right. I don't build these often enough. You know what? We can test real fast to see if it's right. And grab you, bring you down. 2 more of those. Switch you to green. Oop, didn't mean to pull you off. Switch you to kind of a purple color. Why not? You go there. You go there. And I need you an AND gate. You, and yeah, I wanted to go there. You go into the color. Alright. Yeah, we're golden. That's 100% accurate. So yeah, A, B, and here we can even move that up so that they're like 1, 2, 3, 4 in order. So yeah, A, B, skip 1, C. And same thing from the bottom. A, B, skip 1, C. And then in the 2 that you've skipped, that's the output of this XOR gate right here. And then yeah, your 2 AND gates just feed into an OR gate, and that is your full 1-bit adder. So let's go ahead and give that a name. We'll call it just a full adder. And there we go. That is, let me get rid of this junk. Oh, why do you do that? There you go. Alright, so that is it. That is the logic gates that I have built so far. Now mind you, these were going to go a lot further. Unfortunately, the Blender developers, I can't really complain about it. They went out of their way to make sure you couldn't just instantly and easily screw up and crash Blender. See, what they did is they prevented node recursion. So if I plug this in here, I cannot take one of these outputs and plug it back into where my source value came from. As you can see, it muted this line here, no longer allowing those nodes to connect. You cannot connect the output of one node to the input of another node, regardless of how many nodes and weird complicated stuff are in between it. You know, I can grab you and connect you, and then grab you, grab you guys and connect you, and then connect you, and you, and you can, oh hey, how come you cut off of there? You can keep connecting these all the way down over and over again, but as soon as you try, oh, it's because you connected to the, it's because you connected all funny there. Anyway, as soon as you try and take one of them and feed it into the input of one of the originals, it'll break your entire chain. I don't know why. Yeah, see. See, you just can't achieve node recursion. And at one point, I thought I had found a workaround. I was like, ooh, I know, I'll use drivers. That'll work perfectly. But it seems I don't know if it's a problem with the fact that drivers tend to only send an output when updating a scene for render or something like that, or if it was just more of their trying to prevent you from achieving recursion, which would, yeah, crash Blender if you did it any way that wasn't 100% perfect. And yeah, I don't know if it was you know, just not being able to work or them going out of their way to make sure it doesn't work, but you can't use the output value of a node as a property and a variable for a driver. So it's looking like the only way I'm going to be able to achieve node-based recursion is with scripted nodes. And I'm still kind of putting off learning Python, so I'm sorry, but it's going to be a while before I get that. In the meantime, though, these can be pretty fun to play with. And to look at just a quick example or two, yeah, I can close this one out. All right, we have this here. And this is just a node group I put together that's designed to separate a plane into quadrants. And what it does is it gives you the option of turning on and off the individual quadrants so that they're either black or visible for like masking purposes. It's a quadrant mask. And yeah, technically you can pick the color of them, but again, if you're using it for a mask, you probably wouldn't want anything other than a bright white and a black. But yeah, just a little quadrant masking node I put together or whatnot so that I could illustrate how this works a little better. So we're back at the full adder, the full 1-bit adder. And yeah, um, uh, technically right now neither of them on, so we're 0. So we're not illustrating anything. And for right now, this example is only going to illustrate quadrant number 1 and quadrant number 2. So it doesn't matter which of the 3 options I turn on, it's only going to light up quadrant number 1. And it doesn't matter which of the 2 options I turn on, it's only going to light up quadrant number 2. And if I light up or turn on all 3 options, it lights up quadrant number 1 and number 2, aka 1 plus 2 equals 3. So that's how that functions, and if you want specific control over each of them, this is actually just a little decoder I built. And this is absolutely nothing except for not gates and AND gates. Like there's my greater than and less than node. That's a not gate. Oh, no, I didn't want to click that. I wanted to hide it again. This will be an AND gate. Yep, 2 greater thans and a multiply. So that's an AND gate. All this is different combinations of NOT and AND gates, and it functions as a decoder. Basically, it's taking the 2-bit, or yeah, I guess it's technically 2-bit. It's taking our binary output that counts, 0, 0, 1, 0, 0, 1, 1, 1, which would be 1, 2, 3, 4. It takes those output combinations that this produces in binary and basically converts them back to a decimal output in the sense of 1, 2, 3, and 4. So right now, we have no output on that. That's 0, 0, which, technically would be position 1. So quadrant number 1's lit up. Now, if I come over here, it doesn't matter which one of these I turn on. If I turn any one of them on, quadrant number 1 shuts off and quadrant number 2 lights up. If I turn on any 2 of them, we're down here in quadrant 3. And again, it doesn't matter which combination of 2 it is. If any 2 of them are on, we'll be down here in quadrant 3. And then if all 3 of them are on, we're in quadrant 4. So this just illustrates how the 2 outputs is actually technically counting 4 different possible combinations. It's just counting it out in binary, and we count in decimal. So we just have to convert it to something that works for us. Technically, it should be that, and it should be a 3-quadrant thing because this is only capable of counting to the 3 quadrants or whatnot. Same with the decoder. However, this S and this C represent the sum and the carry. And if you're going to use these together, this carry output right here wouldn't get used in a sense. So here, let me make a copy of that. The way that these are actually designed to link together. And what you do is the carry output of one becomes the carry input of the next one in line, or the C input. The carry output, and one more. Now this would be a 4-bit adder, and what we would look at when working with this, we would disregard this C right here. So like, let's make that its own node, and let's yeah, let's get rid of that C, and you need to be a 0, and you need to be a 0. So like basically no matter what we did, we couldn't turn on that 3rd output. It's just not possible. Oh, and I forgot to delete it again. My apologies. Get rid of you. Alright. So yeah, this is how you would link them together. And basically you'd have your outputs. So let's, we can just use you for a quick second. Plug you in, plug you in, plug you in. And you know what? Let's plug you in all the way up there because it doesn't matter. Run shift and then control. Alright. Sorry, I just wanted actual outputs on the right ones so that we could tell which were the outputs, I guess. You could probably already tell. I'm sorry, I'm just weird about that stuff. So we have these 4 outputs, and when they're wired together like this, how we would look at this particular circuit would basically be the ability to add 2 4-bit binary numbers together. So how we have AB, 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 and AB, well, all of the A's would represent one binary number, and all of the B's would represent another binary number. And you know what, technically, oh no, let's go U, shift U, cut U off, grab U. The last one has an output. And this is if our two 4-bit binary numbers added together equal a 5-bit binary number. That's what this is. This would represent your 5th bit in a binary sequence. So yeah, you can add a bunch of these together, all the way up to counting huge numbers if you really wanted. And yeah, they're just full bit adding circuits. Just you need to remember that they count in binary. So this would be our 1's place, our 2's place, our 4's place, our 8's place. So an output of 1, 0, 1, 1. Well, 8 plus 4 is 12, plus 1 is 13. So that would be an output of 13. So you're going to be adding binary inputs, and they're going to come out as binary outputs. You need to keep that in mind when working with these. They work on binary principles, a 2's complement counting system, which is kind of weird for most people because we've spent our whole lives working with a 10's complement, our decimal counting system. Alright, so there was that one example, and then I had one more example hanging out here. I only got one left up there, right? Yeah. And this was just some quick implementation of one of those adding circuits or whatnot. And all I did was I have it hooked up to those 3 mix shaders, just like I did in the one example where the cube could change, 3 different colors. I just got it hooked up with them. Here's my AND gate, just like before. So an output of 1 will activate this color. An output of the output on the 2's line will activate this color, and an output on both lines will activate this color. However, what I've done differently here, scoot you up, we don't need you in view, is I have assigned drivers to some value inputs, and then I have attached them to my adder. Now, you may notice we have these nodes right here. These are just absolute value math nodes, and the reason those are in there, and you can ignore the bottom number, the absolute node doesn't use the bottom number, but the reason these are in here is because I currently have these drivers associated with the location of my cube. So what this will do is when my cube moves, it'll change the color of my cube. However, my cube can move positive on the x-axis, and it can also move negative on the x-axis. This adder is designed to work on anything above 0 will activate it. Unfortunately, like -10 is not above 0. So that's why these absolute values are in here. These will take whatever this value happens to be, positive or negative, and give us the absolute value of that, aka the positive version of the number. So if it's a positive number, we keep our positive number. If it's a negative number, it converts it to a positive number and then sends it down the line. So that's the only reason those are in there. Oh, and also for this, I know from personal experience that when Blender lets objects move around in the 3D space, sometimes, say you're moving an object on the x-axis, on occasion it might wiggle just a slight bit onto the y-axis or a slight bit up onto the z-axis, and it'll snap right back into place right away, but Blender for some reason lets it have that little bit of wiggle while it's moving. So to avoid problems, instead of a greater than set to perfectly at 0, I have my greater than set to 0.001. That way there's just a tiny bit of wiggle room. I can get just a little bit of wiggle room before it switches the switch. Alright, so now this in action And yeah, this is tied to the X, this is tied to the Y, and this is tied to the Z. I just have one driver on each of these, and they're just associated to one of the three X, Y, Z location properties. Well, if I come over here and grab my cube and lock it onto the X-axis, you can see that my cube turns green as soon as it moves away from center. If it's directly on center, it's black. But as soon as it moves away from center, it turns green. And that's on the X-axis, that's on the Y-axis, and that's on the Z-axis. Again, because how the circuit works, it doesn't matter which one is changing, it's just counting basically how many you're changing. So if I hit Shift-Z and now let this move around on the X and the Y-axis, well, instead of black or green, we've gone red. And that works the same for all of them. Shift-X, now we're moving on the Y and the Z-axis. Up and down and forward and back, Shift Y. Now we're moving side to side and up and down. Doesn't matter which two axes it's moving on, it's only moving on two of them. Therefore, it's going to take the second position color. And of course, if I just grab it and move it around in all three directions, it goes blue. So yeah, again, if it's moving on just a single axis, whether it be X, Y, or Z, it's green. If it's moving on two axes, it goes red. And if it's moving on just all three axes, it goes blue. So there's just another quick example of that in use or whatnot. And yeah, definitely has potential for dynamic materials, dynamic painting. You know, well, I have these three objects, and as they move across the scene, I want them to change like this, but I only want certain parts of them to change if other objects with these properties are nearby, stuff like that. So yeah, you can kind of use them as if-then statements to govern various effects and factors inside your environment without having to incorporate quite as many drivers into the setup. So there you go. There's logic gates and material nodes. Hopefully, with any luck, you managed to learn something from this. If not, I'm sorry. If you got any questions or comments, go ahead and throw them down in the comments down below. And yeah, as always, good luck with any projects you happen to be working on. And in the meantime, enjoy creating things your way.